So the chine assembly. So I've got all of the frames notched into the stringers now, and you can see that they are paired back up to all the bulkheads. So we've got everything in place, and it's looking really nice actually. It's amazing how much that's firmed up the whole structure. It's really quite rigid now, and nothing's even glued yet. These are all just dry fit joints. The process is going to be to dry fit pretty much everything. We're going to work through all of these laminations and items that have got to be set up, ready to get on the boat. And then we'll do a complete strip down. We'll take all of this stuff back out, stringers back out, all of them. With the full-size boat, you'd coat all that with epoxy, and then you'd reassemble the whole thing. I'm probably not going to do that at this scale, because even the scale of the epoxy is going to be too much. It's going to be really thick on all these little joints, and it's going to create me some problems. But anyway, you can see how things are looking pretty nice. Got a good shape to the bottom of that boat now. So let's take a look at the chines and the process for putting them in. So we've got these big chine flats on Temptress that you can see the cutouts for here in the framework. And what we're going to do in this video is take a look at the laminations that form that. So we've got 3 layers to the chine. You can see that illustrated on this drawing here. We've got 3 layers of plywood which form the chine flat. Then we've got a chine top rail which helps to carry the side planking when that gets installed. And then we've got a chine bottom rail which helps to carry the bottom planking into this flat when that gets installed. So what we're going to be doing is making these chine flats, and you can see the assembly at the top there. 3 layers of plywood, and the way that they join together is with this little dovetail system. So they've got dovetails cut in that's locked together, much like some of the stuff we've seen before on the stringer jig. And those are staggered throughout the chines, so that there's varying overlaps there, and they're all numbered in a sequential system. So basically we've got chine layer 1, so that's indicated by C1, and then we've got chine layer 2, C2, and chine layer 3, which is C3. And then we've got A, B, C, D, which form the parts longitudinally down the boat. So D up forward, and then C, B, and A. Simple as that. So let's get one of those dry fit together, and you can see what it looks like. So we've got two sets of these. Obviously we've got 2 chines, one either side. So we've just got duplicates of each of these parts. So I'm going to just pick one of those and show you how that goes together. And that is just a simple slot together dovetail system. And that is our complete layer 1 chine flat. So you can see we've got 4 joins in that for the first layer of the chine. We'll put the second one together, and you can see how the lines differ. Okay, so layer 2, and you can see that when we put those 2 together and form that lamination, we've got a staggered system in those joints there, so that we're not creating any weak spots throughout the lamination. Hopefully you can pick up those dovetail joints there. Okay, so that is one layer of our chine lamination. Now the edge set, which is the curvature in this direction as it comes inwards towards the stem on the boat, is cut into these ply sections with the shape that you can see here. And the spring, which is the curvature which is put into the chine in this direction, is formed by these 3 laminations. So what we're going to do is we're going to form those laminations on the boat, and then we're going to take it off, clean it up, and then put it back on the boat, same way we do all the other laminations. Let's take a look at how it fits. So we've got a bit of trimming required first. We're going to want to get these portions of the strong back legs out of the way, because these have just been roughly cut and placed for now. We're just going to chop those out and get them clear, because we want to be landing the chine onto all of these flats. So let's just cut those off. Okay, so what we're going to do is to drop the laminations onto this chine flat. And what we have with these parts is exactly the same as we do with all the laminated components. Everything is oversized, and it's going to be trimmed back down afterwards. So what I've done is I've applied an offset on either side of this part, to make this wider and it's longer, and generally you've just got plenty of material for trimming after lamination. So what we're going to do is eventually trim this down to match the topside planking when we install that. What we're looking to do at this initial stage is just to glue this lamination to form the spring curvature that is put in this direction, and then we're going to take it back off the boat, we're going to clean up the edges, and we'll start to shape all of these cutouts in the frames so that we can bring that chine into place, and then we'll shave the outside down, bevel that to take the topside planking a bit further down the line. So right now we're looking to land this chine on all of these cutouts along here, and there's just a little bit of work that we got to do to get things just right, and most of that is based around frame 9. If you remember, frame 9 is our one that's a little bit different to all the other frames because it's at an angle forward in the boat. So that means that our chine landing is going to be on an angle, so we need to bevel that first. Okay, so you can see what we've got going on here with frame 9. Because that's on an angle, that needs to be shaped just slightly to take the chines so that they sit nice and flat. And you can see the effect that that's having on these aft frames here. That's just kicking that up slightly so that if we were to pull that down and seat it on that frame, it's going to create a high spot here around frame 9. And we don't want that, we want a nice smooth fair lamination. So we're going to get frame 9 beveled. We do that the same way that we do all of the bevels on this build, and that is going to be to take down the high side of the bevel, which is this side here, take that down until the low side of the bevel, which is this side here, matches the chine, and we've got a flat line through that. So I'll get going on that. So we want to strike a line through this corner of the frame here. This one is going to come down in height, and then this one is also too high, so we want to strike a line to this corner of the bulkhead. So if we join up that corner with that corner, that is going to give us our correct line to bevel to through this portion. So there we go, you can see that frame beveled to fit the bottom of the chine, and that's allowing us to get a nice lay of that through the aft portion of the boat now. Now there's going to be some beveling on the forward frames as well. As you can see, look, as this chine comes forwards, we've got a little bit that we want to take off on these frames and get that just landing nicely on there. So we'll do a little bit of work on those frames as well using the same process. Okay, so we've got a couple of those frames just beveled a little bit now, so that you can see they're starting to catch the angle of that chine as it comes down. So that means that we've got this landing in its correct plane. There'll be a little bit more shaping and beveling to do on these frames when it comes to actually installing the chine, but what we're looking to do at this stage is just to form this lamination. Now you can see that I've got the stem mould fixed in place, so I've set the height of that on the waterline 1 mark, and we've got that fixed to the forward rung in the strong back, and then I've removed the stem lamination for now. The reason for that is that I haven't beveled these notches yet, so it means that with the lamination on here going through these, that's not actually sitting quite in the right place. So you can see here, again, we bevel this in the same way that we do all the things, so the forward end of that framing needs to come down to meet the line that is indicated by this gusset. So once that's beveled, the whole stem lamination will drop down, and then it will fit neatly into all those frames. At the moment, with it strapped to the mould, it's trying to sit a little bit too high, so that's interfering with things. And the reason that we need this stem mould in place at the moment is to just get the reference for the top face of the chine, which you can see there. So that's marked on the stem mould, and that is this top face of the chine lamination. So when we get that in place, we want to just be landing that on that little line there, and then that's going to follow on nice and neatly throughout all of our frames. So let's get that glued up and put in place. So again, gluing process for this chine is going to be the same as all the other lamination stuff that we've done. We're going to be using epoxy to wet out all of these laminations. Of course, we've got end grain, masses of end grain within these little dovetail systems in the plywood, so these certainly want to be wetted out with unthickened epoxy. Let that to finish wicking into the end of the plywood before you assemble that joint, and then we're going to put these laminations together with a fairly runny, actually not too thick, because we've got really nice good faces of this plywood, so we don't really need any sort of gap filling properties of the epoxy. So we would go with a fairly thin mix of thickened epoxy to glue those layers together. If I was doing this on the proper boat, I would be wrapping this entire assembly in polythene. So I'd do this on the bench over here. I'd lay the whole Chine assembly out, wrap it in polythene, as I've showed you before with some of the other lamination procedures. Then we put this on the boat and we'll spring it into place. We'll let that dry and take it off. We don't want to be sticking anything to any of these frames at the moment. We're just looking to form the spring curvature that is in this Chine. So as I've said with the model before, I'm using slightly different glues just to help me progress through this a bit quicker. That's pretty much the only difference between that and the way that you do this on the proper boat. So let's get and glue that up, clamp it in place. So the Chine's clamped in place. The good old saying, you can never have too many clamps. I tell you what, it's very true. You want to just keep putting these on until you run out, really. So if you're doing this on a full-size boat, you're going to need a lot of these. Clamping procedure, I didn't really think forward too much about that, and I'm not really that pleased with what I've got here. As you can see, I've run these clamps down to the top shear line sort of point of the frames. Obviously that's completely unfeasible on a full-size boat. So there are a number of ways you could do it. You could actually pop some little screws through this Chine flat into the frame and pull that down nice and square. That would work quite nicely. Temporary screws obviously that are going to come out. Actually thinking about that, if you're wrapping this in polythene with epoxy, that's not really a great idea because you're going to be punching holes through that. Another little idea that I had, I'm just going to set the camera up and show you how that could work. So I was kind of thinking actually a much better method would be to just put a piece of scrap timber across the frame like that, and you can clamp that to the frame, and then that timber is going to give you a nice plane with which to apply force in the correct direction. So a couple of little wedges, something like that, you could just drive those underneath there and just put a little bit of pressure down onto that Chine. That's probably a much nicer way of doing it, so especially if you've got this wrapped in polythene to avoid the epoxy sticking to anything. The clamps, as I've done them, not really a good idea, I don't think, on the full-size boat. There you go, there's nothing like a trial run to see what works and what doesn't work. That's probably how I think I would do it next time. Okay, so there we go. curvature in our chine. This is going to be a massive piece of timber on the full-size boat. This is almost as tall as me, even with the model, so it's going to be a big bit of timber. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go downstairs into the shop and clean up this inside edge. So we want to just square up the edges of this lamination, get those nice and neat, and then when this finally goes to be installed on the boat, we're going to use that inner edge to cut the bevels on the inside face of these frames. We've done the bottom face of them, we're going to do the inside face further down the line when this goes in. We're going to leave the outside fairly rough for now because we're going to finally size that when we put the top side battens in and we start to form and fair the shape of the side of the boat. So let's go downstairs and get this cleaned up. So there we go, there is the cleaned up chine flat lamination. I did actually do a bit of cleanup on the outside in the end, just neaten things up and get rid of some of that glue squeeze out and make it look a bit tidier. But as you can see, we've still got masses of material on the outside here. I could possibly reduce that offset a little bit in the plans because there's going to be quite a bit to take back there. But it just gives you loads of scope for slippage on the inside edge to give you something to clean up there. And as you can see, we've still got to come in a little bit as well. So what we're going to do is cut the bevels on these frames here. So we'll use this chine line to mark that, and then this will move inwards in this direction and we'll set it into the stem as well, up forward. So still a little bit of tweaking work to do, but we've got that lamination done. So that's a nice another component added to the mix. So obviously there's another one of those to do. I'll do the second side one, and then it's another couple of bits ready to go into the boat. So we're getting one stage further. So that is the process for forming these huge laminated flats on the chines for Temptress. We've got some more work to do on the chines, as I said, when we do the top side battens. We'll put the top rail in and we'll put the bottom rail in and we'll see how we bevel those. That's going to come further on down the build stage when we start to actually glue everything in place, and then we're going to be beveling all the frames. We're going to be starting to prepare everything to take some planking for the boat. So there's one more component that we're going to have to do before we can get to that stage, and that is going to be the keel. So we're going to get the keel laminated in the next video. We'll put the stem in place and I'll bevel those little notches that I was talking about in the forward frames to get the stem down in the right position. Then we'll look at laminating the keel, and once we've done that, we're going to have everything we need to start to do a final assembly of this and get bits glued in place. So that'll be pretty exciting. So as always, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I will catch you in the next one. Cheers guys.